They'll go board a ship and they'll produce a video, and CNN will play it, and the American people say, "My God, we're maintaining one hell of a blockade." Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz opens up, and instead of having 13% of capacity flowing through, we'll have close to 100% capacity. It won't be 100 because Iran isn't going to allow shipping affiliated with Israel or the United States to go through. But you'll see the other states say we need peace with Iran. We need normal relations, and they'll start establishing it. The Strait of Hormuz solves itself in Iran's favor if nothing is done. And that's what I would advise the president. Just don't do anything. Let Mother Nature run its course. When I was in college, I always laughed about the way the sidewalks were laid out, because I'd come out of my dorm and there'd be a sidewalk just going straight up there. And I'm like, well, how the hell did they decide to put the sidewalk that way? And then I talked to one of the managers. They said, well, back when in the day, because it's a college that was made in the 1700s, students just walked to classroom, and students take the most practical route. And all we did is take a photograph above, and we said, that's where our sidewalks are going to go. We're just going to lay down sidewalks where the students naturally go. Nature takes its course. Let the Strait of Hormuz define itself. If you do this, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, they're all going to come together and say, what do we need to do? Because we all benefit with the strait being open. How do we make this happen so that everybody, and this will not just lead to economic understandings, but political understandings as well. And again, from the United States perspective, we lost a war. The question is, how do we clean it up? The more we try to intervene now to force an issue with a weak hand, it doesn't work. Give it 6 months of doing nothing. Let Mother Nature decide what's going to happen. And then come in and say, all right, now that you've created this, how can we unplug without disrupting this? And that's the key, to be as least disruptive as possible to something that is operating to the economic benefit of the collective, of the world, of the United States. This is what I would advise the president. It's a damn good, it's the way to go, but he's not going to do it because this president has to be in control and people are going to wake up and piss him off in the morning. I mean, again, Oman, 1 minute we're working with the Omanis on how to negotiate passage to the Strait. Next minute we're bombing them or threatening to bomb them. How do you do this? 1 minute with the Iranians, we're lifting sanctions on the IRGC. The next minute we're talking about resuming a massive bombing campaign. I mean, this is the kind of policy inconsistency that creates paralysis. I think Iran in the long term is going to allow Mother Nature to run its course. Iran's already taken the approach that I've recommended, just hands off. Trump, we're not dealing with him. We're not dealing with Trump. We're just going to let Mother Nature do its thing. And if the United States did that as well, Mother Nature, the natural course of events, because everything works on a pattern. I mean, people need to eat. That means we're going to find ways to get food to the table, which means that people are going to collaborate on how to get crops, picked, processed, and transported. And you just let the natural course of things decide this. People need fuel. People need these things. We already have infrastructure in place that will naturally gravitate to meeting the needs of the collective if we just let it do its business without, imposing wars on it to be disruptive. We lost a war. The United States lost a war. There's people out there that don't want to admit it, but we lost a war. The best thing to do right now is figure out how we can repair the damage done by conflict. And the best way is to ensure that there is no future conflict. And the best way is just to let the locals. How do you stop this may not work with gang wars, but how do you stop, a local fight? Get the outsiders the hell out of the way. Remove the outside pressure. And you'll find that locals will come up with compromises that allow things to happen so that life returns to normalcy. Local solutions are the best solutions. And right now, the Strait of Hormuz needs a local solution, not one that's dictated by a mad, insane, cult leader in Washington, D.C.
What do you make, Scott, with what has happened with the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier? Because there is a new report on MSNBC. It says that the aircraft carrier was not resupplied because Secretary of War Pete Hegseth lied to Donald Trump about the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet in Bahrain being completely destroyed by Iranian strikes.
But
Is that
here's the thing, though. Let's just start with the basic evidence. Photographs have been put out there. I mean, people like Trita Parsi, you know who Trita Parsi is. You know, he's promulgated photographs. Other people put out photographs. They're just straight up fabrications. You can't put a picture of a photo of a flap on an airplane with people writing things on the flap. I mean, obviously they'd never been on board an aircraft carrier, understanding that the aircraft maintainers would never allow a plane to get that dirty to begin with. We clean our airplanes, believe it or not. But first of all, that wasn't on an aircraft carrier. That's not a carrier-borne airplane. That photo was taken on the ground. That's not a carrier-borne aircraft. So it's a fabrication, which now you have to ask, wait a minute, are people out there fabricating? There was a photo of a cafeteria. It's not on any aircraft carrier, any ship. You don't have cinder blocks and all this kind of crap. So we know that there's data being put out there that is supposed to be from concerned family members about what's going on to Abraham Lincoln. So right off the bat, we got a problem. Two, here's the collapse of that story. Where is Bahrain? Now, you're smart enough to know that Bahrain is north of the Strait of Hormuz, in the middle of the Persian Gulf. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, I had warehouses full of sustainment in Bahrain, and I got an aircraft carrier that's south of the Strait of Hormuz. How am I supposed to get that stuff to the aircraft carrier? Because it ain't coming north, and I ain't moving anything south. So already it's stupid. Because I'm telling you right now, Abraham Lincoln's sustainability was not linked to Bahrain in any way, shape, or form other than administratively through paperwork. That there are no warehouses full of tampons and food and things of that nature in Bahrain waiting to be transloaded onto the ship. So that's just a straight up lie. All right. There is a facility in I believe in the south of Saudi Arabia, where the Navy has built warehouses that are used. They can have aircraft fly in, load up, and fly out. And that may have been impacted by, threatened by Iranian missiles, although I didn't see any evidence of any Iranian missiles striking that. But they're trying to say that Bahrain got blown up. You couldn't use this facility because of missiles, so they went out to Diego Garcia. And, in Diego Garcia, the stuff was there, but it couldn't get to the ship. And I'm like, well, that's not true. We have ships that are designed to resupply. It doesn't take forever to retask one. We have them in the U.S. Navy. They might not be as many as we used to have, but God, it is an aircraft carrier in a combat zone, sort of like the number one support priority in the United States Navy. So the notion that we couldn't get a ship out there, and worst case, what I just get a whole bunch of the Greyhounds, the resupply planes, and I get 50 of them, and I just fly them in, load them up, fly them in. They land, offload, take off, go back. Easy said, easy done. So there's a lot about this Abraham Lincoln story that just smells like 100% BS. Do you have morale problems on a ship that's been extended that long? Hell yeah. Could there be maintenance issues on board that ship? Yes, there could be. I'm not saying there are, because once I've seen a fabricated photograph, I become suspicious of all the videos I've seen. Remember, it's 5,000 plus, or thousands of people on that ship, and you're showing me 5 clogged toilets, and you want me to believe that automatically translates to the totality of the ship? The entire story doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What I see are people trying to create it's information warfare. There are people who are against this war, and I'm on that side. I'm against the war too, but they're using this as an example to create dissension inside. I'd normally, me, I would not speak up in defense of the Trump administration or Pete Hegseth or the Department of War, Department of Navy. But the facts are the facts, and this Abraham Lincoln story just smells of a fabrication. I'm not saying there isn't morale problems. I think there are. I think you're going I mean, God forbid, when the data comes out, you're going to see a whole bunch of divorces coming out of this deployment because it was extended. People need to understand that when U.S. Navy in peacetime goes out on a deployment, things happen. Families relocate. People go to, children get put in schools. And again, because people don't want to be disruptive to families, if the ship goes out in the middle of a school year, the wife and the kids might actually move to mom and dad's place before the carrier deploys so the kids can get started in a new school district. And then they're planning on staying for a certain period of time and then coming back, and plans are made. Budgets are done. And suddenly the ship isn't, daddy ain't home and you can't come home now. So now you're stuck there for another semester because you can't, if daddy does come home, you can't. And then the wife just says, screw it. I mean, it's not like I have a husband here anyways. I might as well not have a husband. Goodbye. We're staying here. And, and next thing you know, the guy gets a Dear John letter or Dear John email or Dear John video while he's deployed, and he gets depressed. People have been blowing their brains out on deployment over Dear John letters for a long time. Guys killed themselves in Vietnam. Guys killed themselves in the Gulf War. Guys killed themselves in our Operation Iraqi Freedom. Guys killed themselves in Afghanistan. Love does strange things. And those letters aren't easy to receive. And this is where you need good leadership. Leadership to, not just on the ship, but leadership ashore. Leadership that predicts this kind of thing. That wife should never be surprised. The military should have done a better job, should have kept the wife on the base. And in that school district, and then people supporting. So when the husband isn't home, there's a support network that comes in. That's the way we used to do business. But apparently that's all gone to hell. So when you extend the ship, and this is where Donald Trump is just flat out wrong, where he said they're not deployed long enough. Well, he's never been on a deployment. So what the hell does he know? But the point is, when you do stuff like this, when you mess with deployments, you mess with the lives of not just the sailors, but you mess with the lives of the families. And this has ramifications that impact morale. So I'm not sitting here saying that the issue of bad morale on board the Abraham Lincoln is fake. I think there are elements on the ship that are impacted. But I'll also tell you this, that an aircraft carrier is a unique weapon system, and it is a system. It has aircraft, but those aircraft are facilitated. The operation of the aircraft are facilitated by teams of sailors who are some of the most professional people in the world. This is their life. They launch airplanes, they recover airplanes, they maintain airplanes, and they load ammunition, and they're very proud of their work. And these aren't people that tend to wake up in the morning depressed. They tend to wake up whenever their shift is on and get out there and do their shift. And they take pride in that. We launched aircraft. We recovered aircraft. We did this. And these people aren't. The idea that the Abraham Lincoln has a systemic morale problem is just absolute 100% crap. Because I've worked with squadrons and I know these people. And yeah, the deployment is there, but this is a combat mission. And I'm just here to tell you, people may get upset about this, but the guys dropping the bombs don't give a damn who they're dropping bombs on. They were told to drop a bomb. Whether they're dropping a bomb on the Houthi in Yemen, on Iraq, on Iran, on Hezbollah, they don't care. They have a mission. Launch the aircraft, get the airplane to the target, drop the munitions on the target in a way that deals with the target the way it's supposed to be dealt, recover and get ready to rinse and repeat and do again tomorrow. Welcome to the reality of war. If you think for a moment that these guys are waking up going, why are we bombing Iran? No. You don't live long in a war zone when you start thinking like that. You got to think about, okay, I got to get my crew rest. I got to get up. All right, I got to fly. What are my flight parameters? What's the threat model? What's the intelligence say? How am I going to defeat the surface-to-air missile threat? How am I going to stay outside the range of this radar? This is what goes through the minds of military professionals, and these are military professionals we're talking about. And these guys are operating on a daily basis, on a sustained basis in a wartime situation. Now, you can get them drunk at a bar afterwards and they'll say that was a long deployment, and maybe at that time they've reflected on why we went to war with Iran and they read up on it. But right now, I can just promise you that the vast majority of the sailors on the Abraham Lincoln are doing their damn job. They're doing their damn job. They're not, these whimpering little babies. And again, I have to say, the fact that we have fake photographs being put out there leads me to believe that a lot of what we're hearing about the Abraham Lincoln is just deliberate misinformation designed to affect the morale of the Navy and undermine, President Trump. And again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to undermine bad policy, but yeah, you sort of have to do it in an honest way. And there's a lot about this Abraham Lincoln story that just makes no sense to me.
No. There is a report on Washington Post that says the Pentagon is assessing whether to reduce the U.S. military presence in the Persian Gulf, and they're talking about considering including to move the forces toward Jordan, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. And the question is, how far can they go? Because it's Saudi Arabia. It doesn't mean that they're going to get away from the Iranian missiles, being the target of Iranian missiles. And how do you see the outcome or what has happened so far in the war, considering the American bases in the region? I'm sure that they're seriously thinking of what's going on and what they have to do in the near future.
Well, we have two issues. One, we have a military issue, and the other one, we have a political problem. The military issue sort of solves itself. Until we have a peace with Iran, we can't reoccupy in a meaningful fashion the bases that have been largely destroyed by Iran. So now you have to ask yourself as a military guy, how do I accomplish my mission with reduced infrastructure? Where do I relocate my forces? And this is what's happening. We're pulling back to Jordan, to air bases in Jordan. We're pulling into Saudi Arabia, and we're pulling some assets into Israel, and we're pulling some assets into Europe. Crete, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania. We're moving in that direction. This is just a temporary thing, though, because then the question is, what is our military mission? And that is where politics comes into play. I believe that there's a recognition that we cannot sustain a conflict with Iran over time. And I also think that there's a recognition that the United States lacks the capacity to reorient the totality of its military infrastructure so that we could have the ability to project into the Middle East meaningful military power capable of solving the problems that we can't solve today, like seizure of the Strait of Hormuz, occupation of Iran's nuclear facilities, and the elimination of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. We don't have a military solution to those problems, which means that it's irresponsible to say that that's now our military mission. I think the military mission will be redefined based upon strategic political objectives. And right now, the first strategic political objective is, how do we get out of the Middle East in the least disruptive way? How do we get out of the Middle East in the least disruptive way? And one way is through retrograde operations towards Europe, meaning we move towards Jordan and Israel. But that's not sustainable. I mean, what is Jordan? Is Jordan part of Europe? Is Jordan part of the Middle East, of West Asia? And of course, they're part of Middle East and West Asia, which means eventually Jordan will have to gravitate towards. This is what happened in, when we talked about Syria and Iraq and American military presence in Syria. I always said the moment Iraq becomes unsustainable, Syria is resolved. And look what happened. Iraq became unsustainable. We're out of Syria in a heartbeat. Solved its problem. Kuwait's now unsustainable. We're out of Iraq. And now that, which means we're out of Bahrain. Logistically unsustainable. Can't happen. So we'll fall back. Saudi Arabia, I don't know how much longer we're going to be there, but, Saudi Arabia has begun to look elsewhere for its strategic security requirements. It now has this pact with Turkey and Pakistan. There are alternatives to American weaponry out there that Saudi Arabia can buy into if necessary. We have energy issues that, even though we're not buying Saudi energy today, it impacts the global energy security market. So we may hold on to Saudi Arabia, hold on to a military posture. So Saudi Arabia, I just remind the people, they can't fight. Just remember that. It's not like, when we withdraw from Saudi Arabia, the Saudi army is going, we got this, boss. We got it. We're the Saudi army. We're strong. We lift weights every day. We run 6 miles with heavy weights on our back. We're ready to fight. No, these are the fat guys that get wiped out by Ansarallah every time they go head to head. All right. And Saudi Arabia knows that if they're left exposed, they're going to lose southern Saudi Arabia. Southern Saudi Arabia used to be part of Yemen, and the Yemeni may decide to come and take it. I know during the Gulf War, in the run up in the fall of 1990, we sent the 7th Marine Amphibious Brigade to Saudi Arabia, Eastern Saudi Arabia, and they set up. We're going to stop the Iraqis if they come down. So we got one brigade of Marines. I think we had another brigade of airborne out there someplace, and we're going up against several divisions of the Iraqi Republican Guard. Now, Marines are pretty damn good, Nima, and I will never shy away from a fight. Give me a K-bar, I'll take on a tank any day of the year, but I'll die. They'll give me a medal, bury me nicely, whatever remains of me. But Marines aren't going to run away from a fight. But we knew what we were. We were speed bumps. If the Iraqis had decided to drive south, there was nothing we could do to stop them. Straight up reality. So we're sitting there going, "Hey, Saudi Arabia, by the way, we're in your country to help you." And you got this army down there hanging out by the Yemeni border. Why don't you bring some of those brigades up here, at least pretend like you want to fight with us and die with us to defend your country? And the Saudis were going, no, because those are Yemenis. We're scared of them. We're not leaving our border unprotected. This is the reality. So Saudi Arabia has to deal with the Yemen problem. Now, Pakistan, there was some talk a couple years ago, I think, where Saudi Arabia, made a big deal about getting the Pakistanis to deploy one of their divisions to help out in Yemen. And the Pakis said no. And that caused a little bit of a brouhaha. But Saudi Arabia is dependent upon Pakistan for manpower and the officer rank especially. And what we could see, as long as it doesn't involve the deployment of Pakistani troops into Yemen, because I think Pakistan will reject that. But we could see with this new pact where Pakistani troops come in and help, secure Saudi's border with Yemen, and this might give the Saudi Arabians more confidence, and maybe the Pakistani Air Force can come in and help reinforce the Saudi Air Force and the security of Saudi airspace. And when that happens, then and Turkey here, because here's another big one. People never think about this, but I'll ask you, how many, let's just do some basic questions. Is Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are they friends? And the answer is no, not at all. Has Saudi Arabia threatened Qatar militarily in the past?
No.
How many troops does Turkey maintain on Qatari soil? Thousands. Why? To protect Qatar from Saudi Arabia. But I thought Turkey and Saudi Arabia just signed a defense pact. See, it's not as easy as it looks, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually a pretty complicated situation. I think once the Saudis and the Turks can actually resolve some of their regional differences, Saudi Arabia will feel confident enough to tell the Americans to leave. But in the meantime, America is one giant security blanket. I mean, I used to have a blanket when I was a kid. It's still one of the most traumatic moments of my life. I had this blanket, and it was my little blanket, and I carried that blanket everywhere. I was just sitting there sucking my thumb with my blanket, and I had that blanket as a child. And I remember I got to kindergarten, I had that blanket, and I'm moving into first grade, and this blanket is no longer a blanket because I used to pick at the fuzz too. That was my thing. I had the blanket, I would pick at the fuzz, make little fuzz balls and all that. And one day my mom came in and saw this threadbare thing on there, and she said, "No," and she threw that blanket away. Boom! My world ended. I mean, that was it. I no longer had my blanket. It was just impossible for me to live. Now, eventually I grew up and got away with it. But the United States is that security blanket to Saudi Arabia. And right now it's sort of threadbare. Saudi Arabia's been picking the fuzz at it. But they still need that blanket to go to bed tonight. They still suck their thumb. At some point in time, in order to get rid of that blanket, they're going to have something else that's going to replace it. And is it going to be this pact, this Turkish-Pakistani pact? I don't know, because there's some inherent problems. Again, Pakistan's already told the Saudis to pound sand when it comes to providing troops to resolve the Yemen situation. What kind of ally does that? And Turkey's got the troops deployed to Qatar to fight the Saudis in case they make a move on Qatar. What kind of ally is that? So this isn't what it all seems to be, everybody. We know it's not about Iran. Everybody said, even the Iranians are like, that doesn't bother us. But what's it about? Israel? Or it's just about they don't know what to do because there's now a psychological vacuum in the security realm because the United States has got their butts handed to them by the Iranians. And everybody's going, how do we live going on? So they're trying to construct something. We'll see. But eventually, I believe the United States will have to leave Saudi Arabia as well, because Saudi Arabia is no longer going to be focused, gravitated towards the United States. They're going to be shifting their focus of attention elsewhere, but they've got a lot of problems they have to resolve. Remember what I said earlier about letting Mother Nature run its course? You know who's pretty good at that? One of the best Mother Nature practitioners of foreign policy in the world today, China. China's pretty good about just saying, let it happen. Let's see what happens. See, you know how China does, you know what BRICS is? I mean, not BRICS, but BRI, Belt
and Road Initiative.
Belt and Roads Initiative, yeah. It's the equivalent I talked about in my college. See, China's got this big, giant, hypothetical satellite above there taking a picture of the global economy. And they look at it and they go, I don't have to invent trade routes. They exist. I just need to take control of them. Build a port here, build a port there, connectivity, things flow through naturally. Why don't we do this? So if you take a look at Belt and Roads Initiative and look at how China has overlaid its thing, it's all done upon the natural flow of the global economy. China's not trying to force anything. China's just taking advantage of what exists and making it function even better. I mean, look what they just did. Nobody's talking about it too much, but China set up this company now that is doing scheduled service from Chinese ports into Europe using the Northeast Passage around Russia. 20 days, I think, is what it takes, as opposed to 40 plus days. So it cut the time in half. Costs are lower. It's just the Chinese doing it better than anybody else on a scale. I mean, anybody can say, well, I ran a ship through there. Well, China's just running a ship. They're running ships. That's a big line, giant container ships going through, taking advantage of Russia's 43 icebreakers, including several nuclear power icebreakers. And China's on good relations with the Russians, which means that their icebreaker fees are going to be lower, and they lower the cost of doing it. It's just called letting. The Chinese are really good at this. And the Chinese right now, when they look at the Middle East, remember, they got the Saudis and the Iranians to have a rapprochement once, because it's the natural course of things. See, the United States is the antithesis of the natural course of things. We try to create friction. We purposely create friction so that we have nations fighting each other, because we've decided it's best to sell weapons and permanently keep the region unstable. But what happened there? It leads to a Strait of Hormuz type situation, which isn't just bad for America, bad for the world, bad for the region. And the United States now is the problem, not the solution. So what is the solution? Stop trying to force things. Let Mother Nature run its course, and it will happen. And the Chinese, when that happens, the Chinese sort of moving, because they're the best in the world at saying, hey, let's let it run its course. They'll figure out what's the best pathway and all this stuff, and things will run at maximum efficiency. That's your solution. Get the United States the hell out of there, especially with this current leadership.
Scott, you've mentioned the psychological vacuum. I think that perfectly fits this situation that Saudi Arabia is in right now. And the other point is those blankets that you mentioned, it is American blanket or a Turkish blanket, these blankets are not going to save them from the Yemeni attacks. This is the problem for Saudi Arabia. And just moments ago, before coming to this live, Yemen, they have published a new statement. It says that a blockade for a blockade. It says that your blockade, we're going to respond to your blockade with a blockade on you. And they said not a single Saudi, ship has passed through the strait, through the Bab el-Mandab, and they're going to continue that until this situation going to come down or resolved. This is the problem